Good evening, everyone. Tonight we're starting with a public hearing, Monday, May the 10th. This public hearing is being held pursuant to Section 465 of the Local Government Act. All members of the public will be given a reasonable time to be heard or to present written submissions respecting matters contained in the bylaw that is the subject of this hearing. All information, correspondence, petitions, or reports that have been received by noon today concerning the subject bylaw have been circulated to Council and are available to the public as part of the meeting package. Staff will provide their report, followed by an opportunity for the applicant to speak. Members of the public who have pre-registered to speak have been added to the speakers list in the order that requests were received. Anyone who is not pre-registered may call into the conference line during the live meeting by dialing 1-877-385-4099 and entering participant access code 7382948. I will provide an opportunity for public comment according to the speakers list, followed by comment from those who have just joined the meeting. Speakers will be asked to state their name and civic address. Please note that all representations, whether written, in person, or electronic, are available to the public for viewing as part of the public record. Remarks will be limited to 5 minutes per speaker and should include all of the relevant information in their presentation. Further opportunity will be afforded all members of the public to speak a second or third time with new information only once all persons have had an opportunity to speak. Council may ask questions of staff, the applicant, and the public, but once the public hearing is over, no new information can be received. Council debate on the bylaw will take place during the regular council meeting following the conclusion of the public hearing. The corporate officer will now provide information on the notice of this public hearing.
Thank you, Your Worship. Notice of the public hearing was given by posting on the notice board at Municipal Hall and on the district's website, advertising in the Summerland Review issues of April 29th and May the 6th, and mailing or otherwise delivering 27 notices to owners and occupiers of surrounding properties on April 28th, 2021.
Thank you. So moving on to the matter of the public hearing that's before us tonight is the zoning bylaw amendment number 2021-010 for 1514 and 1704 Wharf Street, Z 21-004, and Alex will be presenting this on behalf of the Development Services tonight.
All right, thank you very much. So the properties located at 1514 and 1704 Wharf Street are proposed to be rezoned from residential estate lot RSD3 to residential medium lot RSD1 to allow for future subdivision potential. A single detached home currently sits on each of the subject lots. Following first and second reading on April 12th, Council scheduled a public hearing for this evening, Monday, May 10th, 2021, for the public to comment on the zoning bylaw amendment, bylaw number 2021-010. Oh, it should be 5 slides or so.
Scroll down there, Greg. Sorry, just scroll down.
Nope. All right. So the properties are both currently zoned RSD3. They could be subdivided with the current designation, but would need to be accompanied with a development variance permit to allow for a decreased lot width. A minimum lot width of 20 meters is required for subdivision of RSD3 zoned properties. 1514 and 1704 Wharf Street both have total widths of 38 meters and 34 meters respectively, which makes meeting this requirement for a 2-lot subdivision impossible for either lot. The new zoning designation, RSD1, only has a required width of 12 meters, making future subdivision easier to facilitate. Next one. Both properties are designated as low-density residential in the district's official community plan. Directing growth to these residential areas with existing services and is efficient and cost-effective for the municipality while allowing a development pattern and density that supports transit, cycling, and walking as viable alternatives to the private automobile. The District of Summerland seeks to increase densities in areas designated as low-density residential from 4 units per hectare up to 22 units per hectare. The proposal to rezone the properties to RSD1 to facilitate future subdivision is supported by the official community plan, policies, and conforms to the density envisioned within it. The introduction of sewer servicing to the Trout Creek neighborhood has resulted in a transition away from larger lot residential zoning in favor of smaller lots. Recent subdivisions in the surrounding area, such as Lighthouse Landing, Treffery Place, and Nixon Road, have all been designated as RSD1. The impact of rezoning 1514 and 1704 Wharf Street on neighboring properties is anticipated to be minimal, as the area is dominated by single detached home development. Changing the designation from RSD3 to RSD1 opens up the possibility for subdivision and infill development in close proximity to services, amenities, and existing infrastructure. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. I would now like to invite the proponent of this zoning amendment. I don't know what the person's name is, but you're shaking your head that person is not here? Okay, they're not attending tonight. Is there anyone attending on their behalf? Okay, thank you. So I will ask if there is anybody in the public that wishes to speak to this. Where's my list?
Madam Mayor, I was just going to mention that we did have one piece of correspondence submitted for this application through correspondence from Gary Nowachka, and that was presented on May the 4th and has been included in the package.
Yes, everyone on council has had the opportunity to read that. Okay, thank you. I don't seem to have a speakers list. Are there no speakers associated with this public hearing?
There are no speakers registered, Madam Mayor.
So that's why I can't find it. Thank you very much. Okay, so given the lack of speakers from the public, questions, council, of our staff? I don't see anyone's hands raised. So I will declare the public hearing closed then. Great, thank you, Alex. Okay, so we'll move right on to our regular evening council meeting of Monday, May the 10th. This meeting is being recorded live and is streaming. All representations to council, written or verbal, will form part of the public record and be available to the public for viewing electronically or as a written record. Members of the public may access the meeting or participate in the following ways. Watch the meeting live or recorded. Individuals who wish to watch the meeting may view it on the District of Summerland YouTube channel, youtube.com District of Summerland, live or recorded. Those who have not registered in advance but wish to speak during the public comment opportunities may connect to the meeting by calling the meeting conference line at 778-907-2071 and entering meeting ID 506-489-9374 and passcode 485186. After I have provided everybody who has pre-registered with an opportunity to comment, the floor will be open to those on the conference line. Directorate of Corporate Services, are there any late items to introduce?
There are none, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So if I could ask someone to bring forward adoption of the agenda. Councillors Van Elfen and Holmes. Seconding, all in favor? Thank you. And then adoption of the minutes for the regular council meeting of the evening of April the 26th. Anything to bring up on those minutes? Okay, could someone bring that forward then, please? Councillor Barkwell, Councillor Patton, all in favor? Thank you. And then right on to the zoning for the public hearing that we just had, bylaw amendment for 1514 and 1704 Wharf Street, Z21-004. Council, feel free to ask questions of staff at this time. All right, I will ask someone to bring forward the motion, please, or a motion. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That zoning bylaw amendment 1514 and 1704 Wharf Street bylaw number 2021-010 be read a third time.
Thank you. A seconder, Councillor Patton. And any discussion? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Great, that carries unanimously. Now on to my mayor's report. The Southern Interior Local Government Association, SILGA, hosted its virtual annual general meeting on April the 28th. Aside from addresses by the Premier and a virtual meet and greet with Municipal Affairs Minister Josie Osborne, members had the opportunity to vote on 31 resolutions and elect directors for the 21-22 year. The three table officers, president and first and second vice presidents, were acclaimed, with all three roles being filled by elected officials in the South Okanagan, so we're well represented. The resolutions now go on to the September convention for the Union of BC Municipalities. On the afternoon of April the 29th and through most of April the 30th, I attended the Chief Elected Officials Forum hosted by the Local Government Leadership Academy. Of course, that was virtually as well. Originally intended to be held in person in Richmond, this was held virtually. The forum covered several timely and well-delivered topics, and the format allowed a good amount of time to network with other mayors and regional district chairs and to share tips, advice, and solutions to challenges many BC communities are facing. The Friends of the Ornamental Gardens, FOG, held their spring plant sale the week of the first week of May. I volunteered to pull plant orders on the morning of May 4th, and I have to say I'm so impressed by the COVID-safe process this energetic group of volunteers have designed. Although COVID restricted work on the gardens in 2020, a lot of work has been done over the last month to bring them back to their former glory. I just wanted to add that Councillor Erin Traynor represents Council on the Friends of the Ornamental Gardens Board. She's the liaison. I received the first dose of the Pfizer vaccine on May the 5th at the clinic set up at the Summerland curling rink. Just like the FOG plant sale, the entire process, including the brief wait times, took just 35 minutes. Summerland is currently a provincial hotspot, meaning that our community is experiencing a higher per capita COVID rate than most areas in BC. The CAO's report includes an update on how this uptick is being addressed. Also on May the 5th, the CAO and I attended a video conference call with Ministers Josie Osborne, Municipal Affairs, and the Minister of Tourism, Arts and Culture, Lisa Bear. Much of the discussion was about the new travel restrictions that run through the Victoria Day long weekend, particularly as how they are impacting tourism. In closing, if you haven't already done so, please complete your census by tomorrow, May the 11th. These data are important for the district and are used in planning, policy, and the overall decision-making process. and I shouldn't have said in closing because I just wanted to bring this to the attention of council and the public. We received this lovely card to the municipality of Summerland. Thank you for helping our community. And they drew some very happy, smiley people. They are mowing the lawn and fixing water. So this is for our Parks Department. And then inside, there's the picture of these kindergarten children that attend Trout Creek Elementary. And they have signed the card as well. So thank you very much, Miss Havercan's kindergarten class from Trout Creek School. And that's it. Over to you, CAO. Do you have a cutesy thing that you can show as well?
Oh, I definitely can't compete with that, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Your Worship, and I wanted to start out by providing an update on the pathway repairs along the shoreline at Peach Orchard and Rotary Beach. I went on site to observe the work a week ago and was very pleased to see the quality of the work being done, from the installation of riprap and trail improvements, including new lighting being installed. Design work includes the protection of the new trail from tree roots, which have been a problem in the past. And we hope to be able to do some additional resurfacing of adjacent parts of the trail while we are on site. Paving for the section north of the T-Pier and the small section at the south end of the Rotary Beach is scheduled for Thursday, May 13th. Following that, the contractor will begin on removing the asphalt pathway at Rotary Beach, which will be paved later in May. There have been some delays in our street sweeping program that we are working through. Council will recall that we have ordered a new street sweeper as part of our capital purchase program in 2021. However, that piece of equipment won't arrive until later this year. Right now, we have a 3-person crew, a vacuum sweeper, and at this time of year, we also employ a contract sweeper. The contractor machine was down for about a week, which put us a bit behind schedule, but that unit is back up and running as of last Thursday. Sweeping is on schedule to be completed by early June. We appreciate the patience of the residents who are waiting for their area to be swept. Due to the level of transmission of COVID in the district, on Friday, Interior Health released information that is accelerating COVID-19 immunizations for people aged 30 and over in Summerland. Residents born in 1991 or earlier can be registered to get vaccinated and will soon be invited to book appointments. Notifications to all registered residents to book appointments will be sent in the coming days. Further information is also available on the district website. Finally, I wanted to let Council know that for the request for proposals for feasibility studies on the Recreation Center and the Primary Health Center that we had posted are now closed. Staff are now evaluating the submissions according to the posting criteria for this Council priority. And with that, I conclude my report.
Thank you, CAO. Council, any questions for Graham? Okay, thank you. We will go on now to the first of 2 public comment opportunities. This is a maximum of 15 minutes with 2 minutes per speaker. Comments and questions must pertain to items on the agenda. And I just want to remind you to introduce yourself and tell us where you live in Summerland. Now, the first person I have on the list is Mr. John Gordon, and he is joining us by Zoom. Please go ahead, John.
Can you hear me fine?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm John Gordon. I live at 8702 Milne Road in Summerland. And Madam Mayor and councillors, I'm speaking with regards to agenda item 9.2, and I'm reading to try and get my comments through in a couple of minutes here. I'm speaking to oppose the proposal for this road closure and removal of highway dedication Bylaw number 2021-18, and the ultimate sale of these lands to private owners of adjacent properties. It's unfortunate that requisite legal dialogue uses the terms walkway, road closure, highway dedication, when actually what's happening there is that 4 or 5 wealthy property owners are attempting to convince council that their interests exceed those of the other 10,000 residents of Summerland. Thankfully, past municipal councils have successfully stood up to ever advancing residential development to leave Summerland with a legacy of beautiful parks and beaches. And 15 years ago, a thoughtful council of the day insisted that subdivision development of these properties on Landry Crescent should retain walkway public access to Okanagan Lake by all community residents through what at the time was a riparian area. The riparian aspects of this location have already been compromised by landowners who've turned the area into beach. Since it would be nearly impossible to restore it as a riparian area, my thought would be to retain it as a beach area for our community. Has council heard about Sickle Point in Culleton, the Naramata Center beachfront in Naramata, the outcry over private interest blocking public beach access in Kelowna? All over the Okanagan, the public want to keep access to Okanagan Lake for the enjoyment of all. With the exception of Powell Beach, Trout Creek boasts a number of small beach accesses, all of which offer limited parking and generally rocky, unkempt beaches and swimming opportunities. The beach area, which would be transferred from public hands by this proposal, is easily the second best beach in Trout Creek, next to Powell Beach, complemented by beautiful sands, safe and easy access to water by families, and adequate parking along Landry Crescent.
Mr. Gordon, that was
Yes.
your that was your 2 minutes. I'll just let you go a little bit longer, provided that you, otherwise I can invite you back after other people have had the opportunity to speak.
2 paragraphs.
Great, thank you.
Since many lakeshore property owners seek privacy by fencing their property, and since existing docks in the area already display signage that indicates that current owners don't want to share their good fortune, is it possible that should the walkway be sold, the future of the right-of-way will be a corridor fenced on both sides, plastered with defensive signage? Now, although complying with legislation through meager publicity on the municipal website, Facebook, Twitter, and a couple of weeks in the local newspaper, you have the power to be forward-thinking and bold. Do it now. Make a decision for all the present and future citizens of Summerland, not just for 4 or 5 of them. Turn down the request, retain the property for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ron Kubek, who wishes to speak to item 9.3, the Downtown Neighborhood Action Plan. Oh.
Mayor Booth, thank you. There was a letter submitted that was circulated to council, and I don't see Ron on the line right now, so he hadn't confirmed if he would actually make it this evening. So the letter has been circulated, and I don't think that he'll be speaking at this point.
Thank you. And is that the last of the speakers? It's the last that I have here on my list. Okay, thank you. So we will move on to development reports. The first one is 9.1, Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw and Zoning Amendment Bylaw for 13316 Prairie Valley Road. That's Z20-13.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just wait for. Okay. The district received an application to amend the official community plan future land use designation of 13316 Prairie Valley Road to low density residential intensification and to rezone the property to the residential singles attached intensive zone, RSD1I, to facilitate a Bearland strata subdivision. Thank you. The current OCP future land use designation of the subject property is agricultural, and it's zoned A1, or the agriculture small acreage zone. So this area of Prairie Valley is predominantly agricultural, with the exception of the institutional land to the north of the property, the location of the solar site, and residential developments along Deer Ridge and at Sunset Place. Oops. Despite the agricultural land use designations, the property was excluded from the ALR in 2008. And it also abuts the urban growth area at its northern property line. I'll be speaking to both these issues later on in this presentation, but just wanted to introduce these topics. The property also falls within an environmentally sensitive development permit area, with the exception of the location of the house and the area immediately surrounding it. It also falls within a wildfire hazard development permit area, and it would be through the subdivision stage and just before the building permit where the applicant would apply for these two specific development permits. So these are photos of the property. So the top image shows a knoll, and it's along the eastern part of that knoll where the property is located. And this provides a bit of context to the slope. And then the bottom images, again, illustrate the slope and show that the area is mostly comprised of grasses, shrubs, and some ponderosa pine as well. And this slide here, the area illustrated in purple represents slopes that are greater than 30%. So what I like about this particular image is that it also shows where the house is located. So you can see that at the top right-hand corner of the property. So just again to illustrate how steep this property is. So the history of this property is particularly relevant to this application. As previously noted, the property was excluded from the ALR in 2008. The exclusion application was accompanied by a report prepared by an agrologist who found that the soil cover was generally light and shallow and sandy, and that removing vegetation on the property would cause serious erosion and slumping if any type of agricultural venture was pursued. In the conclusion of the report, it was noted that the existing ground cover is the best safeguard to prevent soil disturbances and erosion problems in the future. Agricultural operations of the extensive or intensive variety should not be contemplated on this very hilly, steep, knobby property. It was in the agrologist's opinion that the non-agricultural values far outweigh any agricultural potential today or in the future. The ALC also concluded that the property has limited agricultural capability, that it is not suitable for agricultural use, and that it will not have a negative impact on agriculture. So given that the property is not agriculturally viable, the proponent is exploring residential development options. The applicant is proposing a Bearland strata subdivision, which requires amending the OCP future land use designation from agricultural to low-density residential intensification and rezoning to RSD1I. These land use designations were chosen specifically due to the reduced minimum parcel size and lot depth requirements for subdivision compared to other residential zones. So the plan on this slide is conceptual and is intended to provide a general indication of the overall design, density, and layout of the proposed lots. The lots are sited parallel to Prairie Valley Road and would be accessed by a road on the subject property. So any growth, residential growth outside of the growth area without sewer servicing is limited to a maximum density of 1 unit per hectare. An increase in density may be considered if municipal services are extended to the area and extended in the areas designated as low-density residential and added to the urban growth area. With respect to this application, the urban growth boundary must be amended to include the subject property, and it must be connected to municipal services. The OCP amending bylaw includes this adjustment to the growth boundary. The requested land use designations are contingent on the servicing of the site. The RSD1I zone requires access to full urban services, and although sewer is not readily available in this area at this time, the proponent has provided the following options that could still enable this development. The first is to request a variance to Table C22 of the Subdivision and Development Servicing Bylaw to waive the requirement to connect to a community sewer system and to construct a private communal sewer system containing a small effluent treatment plant and septic field that would be operated by the strata, or to connect in the future to community sewer system. The timing of this connection would be contingent on the timing of the district's planned sewer extension through the solar site to the Deer Ridge neighborhood, which is unknown at this time. The applicant has submitted a separate development variance permit application for consideration of waiving the requirement to connect to the district's community sewer system. However, the proponent has requested that this application be on hold until more information is gained on the status of the district's possible sewer expansion to Deer Ridge. Should Council choose to support the OCP and zone amending bylaws, either the variance to the Subdivision and Development Servicing Bylaw or design approval of the sewer connection will be required prior to adoption of the bylaws to ensure that the servicing of the property is compatible with the requested land use designations. If the development variance permit to the SDS bylaw is moved forward for Council consideration, staff will evaluate the merits of that variance request at that time. The focus of the application today is specifically on land use. Policies and objectives in the official community plan indicate that there is a strong desire to maintain the rural and agricultural character of Summerland while intensifying urban uses around or through infill development. This direction was established in the 2008 Growth Management Strategy and reinforced in the 2013 Urban Growth Strategy Report. The OCP provides some direction when considering new locations for growth and provides the following considerations. The first, to consider the implications of proposed developments on the social, economic, cultural, and environmental well-being of Summerland, embrace recognized ecological standards and practices, thus ensuring the preservation of ecological values, promote infill development and selective intensification of land uses within existing urban areas, being respectful of existing uses and ecological values, promote a compact community development pattern to ensure efficient use of existing infrastructure where development supports transit and active transportation. So to address these objectives, the urban growth area is intended to act as the primary planning tool supporting new growth and intensification within the UGA. And on this slide, you can see all of the urban growth area throughout the district, and then highlighted in red is where the subject property is. The OCP also provides guidance in which boundary adjustments to the UGA may be appropriate. These include affordability and efficiency of a utility extension to the area, proximity to an urban node, proximity to recreational amenities, impact on natural environment, community need of a proposed development type, and I'll address each of these considerations individually. So, the property is not currently connected to community sewer, and as I stated, it's required in the Subdivision and Development Servicing Bylaw for the RSD1I zone to have sewer. So either the proponent will consider a variance or a connection to a community sewer in the future. And then the second point is proximity to recreational amenities. So Summerland is fortunate to have quite a few diverse recreational amenities throughout the community. And with respect to this property, there's a diverse trail network. The proximity to an urban node. So the property is approximately a 4-minute drive or a 30-minute walk to downtown Summerland, and this is quite similar to other agricultural or rural areas within the community, including Jones Flat Road, Dale Meadows, and Fosbury Road. Okay, and now on to proximity to recreational amenities. So Summerland's quite lucky to have quite a few diverse recreational activities throughout the community with both indoor and outdoor options. So with respect to this property, it's located just south of a diverse trail network, and it's also quite close to several parks in the area and indoor facilities within the downtown. So the South Okanagan-Similkameen Conservation Program identified this property as having potentially having a very high conservation ranking, moderate relative biodiversity, and a high habitat connectivity in a 2012 biodiversity conservation strategy. These characteristics are also reflected in the majority of the property being within an environmentally sensitive development permit area. So although development can occur within these sensitive environments, objectives and policies in the OCP strongly encourage the preservation of sensitive ecosystems and their connections, as well as protecting wildlife corridors and ecosystem connectivity on private property. Furthermore, the OCP encourages protecting sensitive ecosystems and unique landforms as a way to contribute to the overall character of Summerland, particularly in rural areas. It's possible that developing this land may have a significant impact on this environment, and although the proponents haven't provided an environmental impact assessment to identify the ecological values on the properties, should council choose to give first reading to the subject bylaws, staff would recommend that an assessment be prepared to have a thorough understanding of the impact of development prior to second reading and intensifying the land use. And then with respect to the impact on agricultural land, there would not be a direct impact, but increasing density in this area may introduce the potential for future conflicts between agricultural and residential uses. Okay, and the fifth is community need for this development type. So the population growth in Summerland requires new development and increasing housing stock, and the small lot configurations may suit the needs of young families or seniors looking to downsize, but new residential growth is being accommodated for within the existing growth area through infill development, like subdivision or multifamily developments. Okay, so now talking about land use. So the intent of zoning is to separate uses that are incompatible. In this instance, developing residential properties in a predominantly agricultural area raises the potential for conflict, largely because of contrasting perspectives on what function rural areas serve. Actively farmed areas can produce significant odors, noise from propane cannons, nighttime spraying, equipment and helicopters. They can also produce spray drift and aesthetics that non-farm residents may find unappealing. Conflicts of this nature are known in Summerland, a recent example being the removal of a hedge at a silviculture operation that abuts residential land. The OCP includes provisions that recognize agriculture as a legitimate land use constraint when planning for urban and rural developments. When urban developments occur within agricultural areas, the OCP encourages that the new urban land provide adequate buffers to minimize the conflicts with agricultural operations. The only landscaping requirement in the zoning bylaw speaks to residential properties that directly abut the ALR, and in this instance, the regulation wouldn't apply to the subject property since it's separated by Prairie Valley Road. The Ministry of Agriculture's Guide to Edge Planning provides best practices for promoting compatibility along agricultural and urban edges. The guide recommends a 30-meter setback from the ALR boundary and a landscape buffer within that setback. The hashed marks on the left image demonstrate the approximate location of the setback. The reduced lot depth of the RSD1I zone makes it unlikely that houses can be built outside of the 30-meter setback. The guide also includes recommendations for edge planning along roads as demonstrated by this illustration. In these instances, the recommended vegetative buffer is 7.5 meters. Again, the proposed buildable areas fall within close or within the ideal vegetative buffer area. So overall, this guide is intended to help reduce conflicts between land uses, and although it's not a district requirement, the proposed intensification of the land may not provide adequate separation, and particularly for lots parallel to Prairie Valley Road. When intensifying the land use in agricultural areas, it's important to consider the compatibility of uses and also how to mitigate harm. So the low-density residential intensification land use designation is intended to encourage the redevelopment of single detached houses on fully serviced sites within a 5-minute walk of a node with public amenities. The reduced lot size of the RSD1I zone compared to other residential zones is intended for infill development in mature neighborhoods. Requesting these designations for this property contradicts this purpose and has the appearance of leapfrogging other development within the growth area. A less dense rural residential designation would be supportable by staff given the lack of farming potential on the property. However, the requested designation and the intensification of the residential use is not compatible with district policies that strive to keep growth within the growth area and promote infill development. So the application was circulated to internal departments and external agencies for comments. Most comments from internal departments focused on the subdivision stage or also the building permit stage. This was particularly true for works and infrastructure. Fire and Building noted that the property is outside of the 10-minute fire response area, which may impact the overall design of the homes for spatial separation, setbacks, and construction methods. And the Building Department also noted that drainage should be considered. Small lots with high lot coverage, like the RSD1I zone, may hamper the ability to dispose of drainage on site. The Ministry of Agriculture noted that rural residents on lots next to intensive agriculture are likely to make farm practice complaints. To mitigate this problem, they recommend using the guide to edge planning, which I spoke earlier. They also recommended that a covenant be registered on title for each of the residential lots, stating that they are in a farming area and may be affected by farm practices, including those that may produce noise, odor, and dust. The application was presented to the Agricultural Advisory Committee on March 19th. The AAC recognized that the property is not farmable and that the subdivision may contribute to the overall housing stock in Summerland. They also recognized that the area surrounding the property is predominantly agricultural and that the proposed development may increase conflict. With that in mind, the AAC recommended that the application be denied on the basis of using the urban growth area as the primary planning tool. The application was then presented to the Advisory Planning Commission on March 26th. The APC noted that this development could complement the proposed eco-village. They also raised concerns about access to the site and that traffic flow should be taken into consideration. And some members also noted that the land is inhospitable for development. With that in mind, though, the APC recommended that the OCP and zone amending bylaws be supported. Overall, staff recommend denial of the OCP and zone amending bylaws as the proposal does not align with district objectives and policies that strongly encourage infill and new compact form residential development within the urban growth area and around a central amenity core. That being said, should Council choose to give first reading to the OCP and zoning amending bylaws, staff recommend the following alternate motion to have an environmental impact assessment prepared and presented to Council prior to second reading to identify the ecological values of the site before the land use is intensified. And with that, I conclude my presentation and look forward to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ariane. And now there's the opportunity for the proponent to speak on this. And I see that there are two people here from McElhaney representing the applicant as well as the owner applicant. Would you like to go ahead and make your presentation?
Hi there. Just to clarify, my name is Dan Tirovich with McElhaney, and I'll be the one speaking on behalf of our consulting team.
Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair. Good evening, members of the council. My name is Dan Tirovich. I'm a planner with McElhaney. I think staff have provided a really good overview of the project, so there are just a few additional areas that I want to speak to. The first item was related to development beyond the urban growth boundary, and you likely noticed in the staff report that one of their concerns is that the proposed development is outside of the urban boundary and that new residential areas beyond the existing urban growth boundary should be limited to a 1 unit per hectare density. Although this property is located outside of the urban growth boundary, its lack of agricultural capabilities, its proximity to the urban boundary and amenities make it a good candidate for land use change to facilitate a small residential development. Given the current housing crisis in BC and rapidly increasing home prices in the Okanagan, it does not seem like an efficient use of land to develop this property for 2 to 3 large rural lots, which are only attainable by higher income earners when it's capable of creating 6 to 8 smaller single family lots that are going to attract young families. The second point is regarding servicing. As staff have indicated, our original application also included a development variance permit to allow for a private community sewer system, which would be owned and operated by the strata. However, given the recent developments and council's desire to pursue a sustainable eco-village, which abuts the property to the north, there would be an opportunity to connect the future infrastructure required to service the eco-village. Therefore, we have met with staff and felt that it was appropriate to place the DVP on hold while further details of the servicing strategy for the eco-village are revealed. While on this topic, we do understand that staff provided a presentation to council earlier this morning on the eco-village. We would just like to express our thoughts that the planning for the eco-village should be looked at with a holistic and comprehensive approach, which includes our client's property. This is a very exciting time for Summerland, and there will only be one opportunity to ensure this area is planned correctly. And we would strongly encourage and hope that the district will reach out to abutting landowners to facilitate a robust planning discussion on the future land use of the area. With that in mind, we do believe that our proposed land use change for smaller single-family lots is consistent with new urbanism principles and sustainable development planning, and the owner anticipates to pay for his share of servicing infrastructure. The second item I want to discuss is regarding comments on the development of residential uses in the proximity of agricultural lands. Based on this, we have reviewed the ALR Edge planning document, which provides some direction to residential uses abutting the agricultural lands. The document provides a range of scenarios and provides direction for buffers, with the minimum being 6 meters. However, buffers as pictured on the screen are the ones which are preferred. Based on the development, is likely that the Prairie Valley road widening will be provided, and that when you apply the setback to the existing lots, the distance between the dwellings and the nearest ALR lands should be in the range of 30 meters. Secondly, some concerns were raised regarding potential complaints from future homeowners related to odor and noise associated with the agricultural operations. While we do recognize that such complaints do occur, the staff report notes that the Ministry of Agriculture recommended that a covenant be registered on title for each lot, stating that they are in a farming area and they may be affected by farm practices, including those that produce noise, odor, and dust, and we have no objections to such a covenant or disclosure being registered. We would also like to point out that the agricultural operations adjacent to the property are comprised of vineyards and orchards, and there are no major livestock operations, so we would not anticipate a significant number of complaints. There are a number of single-family homes across the street which all back directly onto agricultural lands, and there do not appear to be any conflict between the two uses. And lastly, the ALR has also consistently said in their edge planning document that roads are one of the best buffers, and a collector road such as Prairie Valley, plus the increases in slope on our client's property to the ALR lands, provides a pretty significant buffer. The last item which we want to discuss was staff's request for an environmental impact assessment to be completed prior to second reading. We do recognize that the property is located within an environmentally sensitive development permit area, and we have no issues with having an environmental impact assessment prepared to support a future development permit. We are, however, a bit concerned with the timing of the EIA. This is a fairly expensive and time-consuming report, and to request it between first and second reading is fairly uncommon, and we don't know whether or not council or the public are going to support the land use change. Typically, an environmental DP is a condition of subdivision approval, such as was the case for the Quebec property, which is right next door. We do understand that the recommendation was for the completion of the environmental impact assessment report rather than obtaining the actual development permit. And based on that, we would recommend that the commission that the condition be amended to require the report be completed prior to bylaw adoption rather than second reading. We initially submitted our application on November 9th, 2020, and staff provided us with their first comments from the Technical Planning Committee on January 28th of this year. And there was no mention of an environmental impact assessment in those comments. The report, which was provided to us on Friday afternoon, was the first time that we have seen this request. So unfortunately, we have not had the chance to discuss this with staff, but would ask the council consider an amended recommendation to allow us to invest the time and money required for this report after and only if we have a bit more certainty on support for the proposed land use change. And, oh, sorry. And if you look at the, I'm just going to try and go back to my slide. Sorry about that. Yeah. So if you look at the boundary of the ESA on the district's mapping, you'll notice that the area which we are proposing to develop is probably, I would say, close to 60% outside of the actual ESA. So the only encroachment which we anticipate would be sort of on the fringe area of the ESA, which is usually has a bit lower quality than the kind of more core areas of the ESA. So based on that, we would request, if council is going to go with the alternate motions, that the request for an environmental impact assessment be amended to allow us a bit more certainty, and that it not be required until prior to adoption rather than prior to second reading. So we've just sort of drafted that wording for you guys as well. And that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions the council may have. Thank you.
Okay, and could you tell me then, are you the only person that is speaking on behalf of the applicant?
I do think the owner himself, Mr. Dan Dinsburg, also did just want to briefly address council.
Okay, Dan, would you like to go ahead then, please?
Thank you. Evening all. And thanks, Dan, for your summary there. I don't have much to add to that other than the fact that I've lived here since '94, and I'm clearly not a developer. And, it was never my intention to develop the property really, but based on what's going on up the hill and the Eco Village and possible sewer lines, I had to look at that with a critical eye. That and the fact that I look in the mirror and realize that I'm not getting younger every day, I'm getting older. And so it's caused me to rethink my position here. Yeah, that's about all I probably would add at this point.
Okay, thank you. All right. So, council, questions of staff? Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The gentleman from McElhaney brought up a good point, is that we did have a 2-lot subdivision done right next door with the Kubik property that I'm sure had a environmental assessment done on it. Being as we're in the same zone as we're being, is it truly necessary to request another environmental assessment on that piece of property?
Through the mayor on to Councillor Patton, thanks for the question. We see that in the consideration of this rezoning application that we'd like to get a greater understanding of the environmental aspects of the site. It's currently zoned agricultural. There is a fairly intensive proposal for residential development for the subject property, but that would have impacts on environmental areas. Although we have required the environmental assessment for the adjacent property next door as part of the ESDB process, we think that this information would be important for council to hear prior to any consideration of the inclusion of this property to the urban growth area, as well as the consideration of the redesignation and rezoning of the property to residential. And for that reason, we were recommending that this study be completed now. It could be associated with an ESDP for the property right now as well, so that there wouldn't be a duplication of effort for the owner in the future, and that ESTP would still be valid for 2 years following the approval of the permit. But we think that it should be something that council and the district requires prior to consideration of adoption of this proposed bylaw.
Please go ahead.
For a follow-up, please, Madam Mayor. So what would be the urgency that we would require only at first reading to have the environment? Why not go through first, second reading as a normal process, allow them to get the assessment done, and then come back to us prior to third reading?
Yeah, great question. Thank you, Councillor Patton, through your worship. The primary reason for going now to following first reading and prior to second reading is because of the requirement under the LGA to not require or introduce new information following the public hearing. So the idea in terms of structure of this application is that we would get a signal tonight if council wants to see this land use considered for the area. Get additional information from the applicant through the environmental assessment, come back in front of council to consider that information and make sure that the council is still aware of or comfortable with moving forward with this rezoning with the knowledge of that environmental information and provide second reading so that we can then schedule a public hearing. And then following that public hearing, then there should be no new information introduced for council to consider the consideration of third reading.
Okay, anyone else? Councillor Barkwell?
Thank you. How wide is the road allowance at that location? Is it what's the standard? I suppose it's like a major traffic route, so it might be bigger.
Through your worship, we do have Chris Johnson I see online, but I think it's 20 meters. You might be able to answer that. He's trying scrambling to turn his microphone on. Okay, there he goes. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, you're right. It would be 20 meters for the right of way for the collector road through there.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Traynor?
This question might be a bit premature, but I'm just wondering, do we know anything about the bank stability in that area, given that it is such a steep slope? And if we were to disturb like the lower portion of that, would that affect the integrity of the mountain there?
Through your worship, to Councillor Traynor, that's a great question. That may be an additional information item that we may want to consider is the geotechnical considerations of the site. It's currently not in a high hazard development permit area, but there is significant slopes upslope of this area. It could be something that we consider in terms of additional information with regards to this application. Thank you.
Councillor Carlson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I recognize that those who are answering this question weren't here when the urban growth boundary was drawn up originally or when it was modified, but I guess my question is, if this piece of land was currently zoned A1, formerly in the ALR but removed, it seems to me like it's not a far cry to be part of the urban growth boundary, and I'm wondering if had it been zoned residential at the time of that boundary being drawn, would it have been included in the urban growth area?
Yeah, I feel bad taking all of Ariane's thunder here, but these are tough ones for her. So thank you, Councillor Carlson. That's a great question. Unfortunately, none of us were here at the time that the urban growth boundary was discussed. You know, it possibly, you know, given that the agricultural area was, something that was discussed later on, I believe. Do you know when it was removed from the ALR?
2008.
Okay, so it would have been removed from the ALR prior to the consideration of the contraction of the urban growth boundary in 2013. So staff would have been aware of the removal of this property from the ALR when considering the urban growth boundary, and for whatever reason, chose not to include it at that point in time. But I can't explain why.
So just to follow up on that then, thank you, Brad. Given that currently the urban growth area includes Deer Ridge and it includes the Toe of Cartwright, and if we're being honest, this is the actual Toe of Cartwright that we're speaking of right now. I'm just wondering, why would we include the very top of Morrow Avenue, which is Deer Ridge, in our urban growth area, but not include a piece of property that you have to drive past in order to get to that piece of urban growth area? It's about 3 or 4 more minutes up the hill past this property if you're driving.
Again, through the chair, to Councillor Carlson, those are good questions. I think primarily the reason why Deer Ridge was included in the urban growth boundary is it was planned for, well, it's an existing development, first of all, but it's also planned for future residential development in and around the Deer Ridge area. I think as part of the considerations of growth, in setting an urban growth boundary, you have to look at where is future growth going to be accommodated within that boundary. And so probably the consideration of removal of some areas like Crescent Beach as well as North Prairie Valley, they looked at Deer Ridge and the area around Deer Ridge as potential for opening up that area for development if sewer was to be made available to that specific area. But you make some good points.
Okay, so if sewer was to be made available as, and this was presented as well, I guess what I'm saying is I don't quite see it as a far cry to adding into the urban growth area, but I understand there's a lot of other considerations that staff have also given this. So I'll talk more about the agricultural part later. I'll let someone else ask some questions now.
Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to add, or to I guess add to what Councillor Carlson was saying earlier, back in the day when the urban growth area was defined, I think today's demand on different styles of housing is much more than it once was when the urban growth area was designated. I think today we all recognize that lack of obtainable housing or diverse styles of housing is a real problem for us in Summerland. And this is an opportunity here for a different type of product to come onto the market. Like said, maybe it's an area for younger people. I don't know. But I don't think this is a far cry from being excluded from the urban growth area. Like Councillor Carlson says, you're driving past that to get to one of our largest subdivisions in the community, and with potential of becoming much larger if sewer does go up into that area in the future. So, I'm having difficulties with this one, and I think it's a good candidate to be included. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Holmes, you're next. Please remember that we don't have a motion on the floor yet, so this is the time that you can ask questions. You can ask questions after the motion's on the floor too, but rather than getting into discussion and debate, this is the opportunity to ask staff questions. Thank you.
Okay, this is a question I've asked in the past, and it's kind of a philosophical one, but it's exactly what Councillor Carlson was touching on, is when you have a leapfrog development, which is what Deer Ridge was when it first went in, what becomes of that land in between the developed part and the leapfrog development? Does that then all of a sudden become infill? In which case, that's the situation we're dealing with now. That's the way I look at it.
Not sure that was a question for me to answer.
Yeah,
But
I didn't hear a question, but.
okay, thank you.
Well, it is a question because this happens in places. So how do you, and you had these leapfrog developments in the past before we really thought about it, and now that we have thought about these sort of things, not we in the district, but in greater society, where we frown upon, we don't do leapfrog developments anymore, supposedly. But when you have this historical situation where there was a leapfrog development, how are we supposed to look at that land in between? Are we supposed to now fill it in so we don't have leapfrog developments anymore? It's a philosophical, but I'd be curious to know what the planning, the thinking is in the planning world.
There's a question.
Yeah, to try to answer them, Councillor Holmes, thank you for the question. I think that every time we review the urban growth boundary, there's an opportunity to look at where we want growth to occur, regardless of there being leapfrog development in the past in certain areas. As an example that comes to my mind right now, the city of Penticton, they just recently went through an official community plan process a couple years ago, and they substantially retracted the amount of growth areas identified within their urban growth boundary, and as well probably included some or excluded some areas that did have development on the other side of it already occur, and in an effort to try to encourage more infill development within kind of the core city area. So, that was a recent example of where there was a review done by planning staff, and now that we know is planning best practice nowadays in terms of encouraging growth and development in close to central core areas, there's perhaps a change in approach, and that means that we need to consider where we want that growth to occur. In this case, and in our case, that review was in 2013, most recent review, and there is areas in between Deer Ridge and the downtown core that are included, including the district's lands are included as an example. Sunset Place, Cartwright Mountain Development that are part of the urban growth area, but for whatever reason at the time, this specific parcel was not included within that area, and it might have to do with the land use aspects to it. I'm not too sure, but we can't really comment on that.
Thank you. Councillor Carlson, then Trainer, then Councillor Barkle, did you have your hand up? Yes, so Councillor Carlson, Trainer, and then Councillor Barkle.
Thank you. Just going back to the environmental assessment, and maybe some clarification. So if we didn't request it at this point in time, and this proposal did move forward past first and second reading and towards adoption, the proponent would still need to show that it's not ESA 1 in particular in order to build along this piece of property. So is that not their risk? Like if the district adds something to the urban growth area, do we actually need to know beforehand if it's buildable property, or does it really not matter?
Through the mayor onto Councillor Carlson, thank you for that question. That's a great question. It actually has to do with a bit of planning law and what takes precedence. And if as a parcel is zoned for a specific use, you have to allow for that use to occur on the parcel. So an ESDP, a development permit, establishes criteria through guidelines as to how we want that use to occur on the site. But zoning takes precedence. So if you have an agricultural zone property as an example, and there are environmental values found on site, that agricultural use is allowed to occur regardless of that site being identified as environmentally sensitive, because we have to allow people to have the property rights and zoning rights that they have. And that's another reason why it's always best practice to learn this information about the site prior to consideration of a change in land use through rezoning and an OCP designation.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Trainer?
I was actually going to make a motion, but I'm not sure if Councillor Barkwell wants to ask another question first.
Yes, we have a couple of councillors that wish to ask questions, so I'll
Okay.
come back to you, Councillor Trainer.
Okay.
Thank you. Going back to Councillor Carlson's point, which is really an obvious point, that to get from one urban growth area to another here, you're driving right past this area. It may not be in a straight line, but that's the way the road grows. And back in 2014, you were on a select committee to review the official community plan with Mayor Waterman, and who was the other person?
Councillor Trainer.
Councillor Trainer, yeah. And I remember specifically addressing this piece of property because it just seemed so painfully obvious that it being adjacent to urban growth area and closer than all sorts of our major urban growth area to the west, which we cut back in that revision, that it should be included. And I spoke to it, and Mayor Waterman at the time, he didn't want to address it because it hadn't been part of the proposed previously in the discussions for the new official community plan. So it was loath to make too many modifications, just the Crescent Beach one and the moving reducing the Prairie Valley West. And that's the way I remember it, Your Honor, or Your Worship, I guess is the right word. Yeah, Your Honorable Worship. But my question is, yeah, it's sort of I never really followed the answer. The environmental and would pay for a property developer to know the environmental values of the land, but we could still do the rezoning, and if you say they have a legal right to build something that conforms to the zoning, but wouldn't they have to avoid the ESA 1 lands that is on that zoning? I mean, otherwise, like, I don't know, the solar site's zoned institutional. You could cover the whole thing with a university without regards to the institutional land, the ESA 1 land, right?
Through Your Worship, you're correct that you do have to allow for that use to occur on site because the zoning trumps the development permit in terms of the planning legislation. So the intent of the environmentally sensitive development is to identify those ESA 1 areas and to try to design and plan the development for a residential development, say that the zoning is approved, to accommodate the environmental sensitivity areas. But council should not be, from a planning best practice, putting any type of residential type zoning on a parcel of land that is deemed to be too environmentally significant to develop. Because once that zoning is there, the landowner does have property rights to consider moving forward with those zoning rights found on his land.
So the environmental assessment only comes into play when somebody's making an application for rezoning? I mean, if I own the land already and it's zoned for some use, I'll just do whatever I want, regardless of what the environmental assessment is, because I don't have to have one?
Well, it is a requirement for any works to happen on a piece of property that we have to issue a environmentally sensitive development permit. It is also a trigger at the subdivision stage. So if you had the zoning in place, we would still require an environmentally sensitive development permit to be issued. But it would still allow for a certain type of whatever is zoned within that zone to occur on the property. Because zoning trumps the requirements for the DP.
So it kind of makes me wonder, like, what's the point of doing it if you're just going to build where you want? The only sort of hard and fast rule then is the riparian areas, which, you know, I understand, it sounds like.
Through your worship, again, it's very similar, actually. They're both the development permit processes, the riparian areas. You know, if a property is zoned single-family residential, let's say on the waterfront, you're allowed to have a house on that property, as an example. But you can design that house to be protecting of the riparian area by putting that house further back, as well as, you know, how it's designed so that you're avoiding any disturbance of those riparian areas. So the intent of the DP is to help in the design process of a potential development. It's still a requirement. You can't go willy-nilly and just go ahead and ignore it, because it is still a requirement for it to be issued through a development permit prior to any work occurring on site. But as well, we still have to allow for a single-family residential dwelling to occur on site.
You don't look very happy, Councillor Barkwood. You're just mulling it over? Thinking it through? Councillor Patton, you're up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question kind of follows along that line. In my head, I just need some clarification. So we go back in the day, and it was the will of council that actually imposed the environmental restrictions on the property within Summerland. Am I correct there? Yes?
I guess so, with regards to the enactment of the official community plan.
Yes, yes. So it was the will of council at the time to invoke the environmental sensitivity. So as we look at this project, and I want to, you know, speak with, you know, Councillor Carlson in regards to the impacts that happen on that property. So if it was the will of council at the time to place it, could it not be the will of council at the time to remove it?
And it's entirely possible for that to occur. It would require an official community plan amendment to review the environmentally sensitive section of the OCP, and it would require a consultation with the community before that could occur.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
I think that kind of gets us to a bigger piece of, you know, at some point, our OCP is kind of, it will need to be reviewed. It's kind of past its due date for that. But it's a huge undertaking. So, okay, any other questions for staff? Oh, Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mine is it's sort of a process question. I know that in Summerland we do OCP amendments and boundary adjustments and things often. And I think one of perhaps something that's standing out here is that there's a planning process here that maybe hasn't been followed in the past. And I'm wondering if it's you know, I understand we're trying really hard to make a consistent process so everyone has to follow the same rules in this community. And I think we've come leaps and bounds. Is this an example of something that maybe we haven't seen before, but we're going to see more of in the future, especially when it comes to hillside developments and environmentally sensitive areas?
Just through the chair, to clarify to Councillor Carlson, do you mean with the requirement for environmentally sensitive assessment prior to consideration?
I mean after first reading. So if if the consultant for the proponent suggests that they wouldn't normally do this until later in the process, I'm just wondering if it's something that if that interpretation is different, if we've changed part of our process, or if something's been updated somewhere that maybe there's now a difference of the planning in the planning world or in Summerland.
I could take that. There's nothing really different about this application. The only thing that's actually different, and the reason why it's before council today, is because we're recommending denial from the staff level. And that's the reason why we wanted to bring this forward at this stage, prior to complete information on the application is provided by the applicant. Normally, in terms of our normal process, if in accordance with our development application procedures bylaw, if we deem that additional information is required to assess a rezoning application, we would request that information upfront earlier on in the application process. But in an effort to actually help the applicant with getting council direction at the front end of this to determine if it was something that you're willing to consider in this area or not, and it was also something that we were uncertain of council's position on, we wanted to provide this forward to council to consider at just the first reading stage prior to requesting additional information and making the applicant go through it, additional costs in order to retain a biologist and do further work on the site. So it is a bit unique, but the main reason is because we're recommending denial.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
Ariane's got something to say here too.
Often applicants will also provide an environmental impact assessment with the application itself too, and that wasn't provided in this case.
Councillor Holmes.
And the primary reason for recommending denial is because it's not within the urban growth boundary?
There was a number of factors to determine staff's position on this, and Ariane's done a good job of going through those factors today. There were I'd say, two main factors. The first one being the urban growth boundary, and she went through extensively as to what the policies state with regards to the urban growth area. And the second is also the land use aspects of the use being proposed, and the potential for conflict of that use with the surrounding agricultural area in Prairie Valley. So those were the two main land use concerns. Additionally, from the staff level, we also had a lot of comments internally from departments on the request for a private septic system. But again, that application is on hold right now to determine whether it's needed to move forward or not.
Councillor Barklow.
If it's appropriate at this time, Madam Mayor, I'll put a motion on the table to get discussion going.
Sure. Councillor Traynor offered to do that earlier, but I don't know. Councillor Traynor, did you want to put the motion on the floor, a motion on the floor, or?
If Councillor Barklow wants to, he can. That's fine.
Okay, and we'll see what we're talking about then. Okay, thank you.
I'll put forward the motion that the official community plan amendment at 13316 Prairie Valley Road, bylaw number 2021-015 be approved, and that zoning bylaw amendment 13316 Prairie Valley Road, bylaw number 2021-016 be approved.
Seconder, Councillor Patton. Okay, Councillor Barklow, you can speak to this now then?
Now you can sort of offer up some views and some opinions rather than just questions. And I guess maybe I've already expressed my view that this, by all rights and purposes, in my view, should be in the urban growth area. It just makes sense. It's between two areas of development. It's a stone's throw from subdivisions and such that you have to look at the sort of the character of Summerland to realize that this is close. This is as close as we can get with new development. And the other aspect that the staff were concerned about, or one of the other aspects, is the agricultural land being across the road. But I am willing to bet, living in the neighborhood, that the road would be far more of a disturbance than the houses, because there's a few houses there in one portion, and then the steep bank on the other. So I think that you can't make rules that one size fits all. That's why there's a council, of community members here to be able to look at some of these unique situations from the a point of view of local knowledge. And in my view that there really isn't much, if any, of a concern for complaints in that area. Matter of fact, they'll sit there and they'll admire the view looking up the valley at the horses dancing around in the ring, and maybe it's really quiet in the evenings and 4 o'clock in the morning sometimes. All the way up at Powell's, there'll be somebody spraying, but I mean, that's it. That's life in Summerland, and that's why people want to live there. And that's what'll be actually part of the attraction. And then as far as the sewer, that's an issue. I guess we have a similar system at Sunset Court, but anybody who is wanting to develop that parcel of land, I think, would be wise and would most likely want to see what develops with the solar site in Eco Village, and just put in a connection to the sewer system. It's all part and parcel with developing that area. So there's my views.
Thank you, Councillor Barkwell. Councillor Traynor.
I was going to make the same motion. Considering that this property is so close to the urban growth area, and then the proposed eco village that we talked about this morning, I'm okay with it. It makes sense to me, and I think it's an interesting proposal. I asked the question before about bank stability, and I don't know about that. So that would be my only concern, is that area does seem quite steep to me, but I'm sure that can be figured out. I guess my only question left for council is the environmental impact assessment. I want to be fair to the proponent, but I also want to make sure that council has all the information that we need. So I'm wondering if it is appropriate for us to ask for that assessment at this point in time. Yeah, that's the only question that I have. I mean, I think I would like that information, but again, I want to be fair. So maybe others have an opinion on that as well.
Councillor Patton.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. I concur with Councillor Barkwell and Councillor Traynor. I think that this is a perfect fit. I like the design. I like the intensification zone. I think the intensification zone actually paid compliment to the site. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot for an intensification zone is a minimum 9 meters wide by 20 meters long. So this fits perfectly in small lots, so that we're not doing such a environmental impact on that property, especially when you're talking about the high slopes over 30 degrees that are running next to it. I do disagree. I believe that the environmental aspect of it, I think that if we received it at time of third reading, it still gives us a lot of time to ask questions during that period of time. And I think for us to stall this moving forward for an environmental assessment at this point, I think does not do service to Mr. Dinsmore in wanting to move this forward in a timely fashion. Thank you so much.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to thank staff for actually paying attention to the conflict potential between an agricultural zone and a residential zone. There's a lot of places in Summerland where I believe there's a much higher risk of that conflict, and we know that there are places where that conflict exists already. I agree with Councillor Barkwell, though, that we do need to look at this on a location specific and a case by case basis. And when you look at that corner in comparison to where the farmland is and what is actually being actively farmed, I don't think that that case needs to be made at that particular site. I know a farmer that flew a helicopter at 6 a.m. on a Sunday morning recently, and Facebook, people were questioning what was going on, and then they were hoping for a really good cherry season. So people in this town understand that it's an agricultural community, and they know that wind turbines are going to be on frost mornings, and they know that on spray days there might be blowers in orchards, and these things they're going to continue to be in this community, and people are going to continue to want to come to our community. And so in educating the people who come here is really important, but stopping them from coming here just because we're afraid they might not want to live in a farm in a conflict with farming, I don't think is necessarily the best way to go about it. So that's sort of my agricultural perspective on it. And I do think that we need to consider, when it comes to the urban growth area, that this piece of land, it fits. I believe it fits in the urban growth area. And I think that it was missed when that boundary was drawn. Sometimes these things are a little bit arbitrary, and things do get missed. And so I think that the potential for it to be a very successful small subdivision and hopefully tie in and be part of what it is that the district is proposing with this eco village. And even further up, if Deer Ridge can also, any further development up there, having a higher standard of environmental sensitivity and making it an eco-based, there's great potential for this entire area and that portion of our urban growth area. So I will support this and look forward to finding out what the next steps are.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a comment and an opinion. It was said earlier that, there might be a covenant put on these pieces of property indicating to the new owners that they're buying and adjacent across the street is agricultural, and there may be future conflicts. I would bet you that people would go, that's why I'm buying it. It's for the view, it's for being in the rural area, being close to agriculture, and I think that would be a major selling feature for this property. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I don't have any problems with including this particular property in the urban growth area, but I do have a comment to make on the environmental assessment. I mean, we spent a lot of time on that just this morning talking about the eco village, and it was made quite clear that we can't really do too much more on that development concept. We had a roundtable asking how we would feel about environmental, if it turned out to be primarily ESA1, and if that was going to be a no-go, and we talked about that possibility, but it was pretty clear that the environmental assessment, even on this proposed very early concept idea, was something that we needed to have done before we went any further. So I don't have any concerns with asking for that to be done on this property. It's not saying that it won't go ahead, just as we spoke this morning. If we're dealing with ESA1 in the proposed eco-village area, then we work around that and we make the changes that we need to do to make sure that it still honors those values. So I don't have any problem, and in terms of a comment that was made, we need to move forward in a timely fashion. Let's just remember that it's not like the sewer is going to be going forward in the next 2 months. So I don't really see what the hurry is in terms of not getting an environmental assessment done after first reading. I have a few concerns about what the agrologist said about removal of the vegetation and the possibility that there's highly erodible soils there. But I'm not an engineer, and I would hope that there will be geotechnical assessment on the property before, as part of the subdivision development approval process. So I don't have a problem with the urban growth area, but I don't see what the issue is with not getting an assessment done that needs to be done anyways, that will just give us and the proponent more information on what actually could happen potentially on that site in terms of development. Just 1 minute, Councillor Barkwell. Councillor Holmes, did you want to? No, okay. Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Something that Councillor Carlson caught my ear when she asked about, is this the beginning? Are we going to see more conflict? And I think she's asking a question. I think the answer is right. When we've removed the restrictions on hillside development, because that's a lot of the land we have left, and we're protecting the agriculture land, more of these things are going to come up. That's where a lot of the environmentally sensitive land is. So as we try to develop the hillsides, we're going to see this conflict. I don't know how it's resolved, what's left. I think all development and all plans wind up being a compromise of one kind or another. Somebody might want something bigger, somebody wants something smaller, somebody wants that part preserved, and somebody wants the other part preserved. Somebody doesn't want more traffic. There's always going to be, I think it's the start of things, I guess is the short answer. And I also have to agree with her when they do the official community plan. It's it's not the biggest town, but there's a lot of area, and you can't talk extensively about every possibility for every parcel of land. So it's quite possible, quite likely that not only do things change, but maybe a fulsome discussion wasn't had on any particular parcel, and that could have been the case on this parcel back prior to the 2014 changes. And probably when it was considered prior to 2014, which was, I don't know, you talked about the dates, but there's always going to be something like this. It's just going to come up, and we shouldn't beat ourselves up if we're having to make changes to the OCP now and then or such.
Okay, I don't see any more hands up, so I will assume that this discussion everyone's had the opportunity to speak that wishes to. So I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? I would have opposed. I would have passed the alternate motion, but I am opposed to just outright approval. Okay, so
Madam Mayor?
that is, yes.
I was just wondering if I might make a second motion.
Well, we've just voted on it.
Right, but I'm
and
just.
It's carried. Oh, you
understand,
mean in addition to?
Yeah.
I don't see why not. Just let me check with the Director of Corporate Services. Councillor Carlson, maybe you could direct your comments to the corporate officer, and then she can determine what's the best way of wording this.
I'm just wondering if I might make a motion regarding the environmental impact assessment, or if we need to.
Madam Mayor, the motion that was just passed was support instead of non-support.
Mhm.
We still, council could consider giving first reading to the bylaws. They have been attached to the package, so council can also consider first reading or first and second reading of the bylaws. Certainly a further motion is something that council can put on the table.
In that case, Madam Mayor, if I may.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, I would like to move that the official community plan amendment for 13316 Prairie Valley Road, bylaw number 2021-015 be read a first time, and that zoning bylaw amendment 13316 Prairie Valley Road, bylaw 2021-016 be read a first time, and that an environmental impact assessment of the property be prepared and presented to council prior to second reading of the OCP amendment for 13316 Prairie Valley Road, and the zoning bylaw amendment at 13316 Prairie Valley Road, bylaw number 2021-016.
Seconder? I will. Okay, Councillor Trainer?
Can I ask for clarification on that? I thought we just
Yes.
voted on 1 and 2. The official community plan passing the first time and the zoning bylaw passing a first time. Is that correct? We just did that vote?
No.
No?
I'm kind of confused too. Everything was exactly as you see it, but instead of be denied, it was be approved. So I'm not sure how we can approve an amendment just like that.
What I understood was that we passed those two, and that Councillor Carlson is making a second motion to just add on the environmental assessment impact. Or impact assessment, is that correct?
I can clarify with Councillor Barkwell, but I do believe it was the motion that was of non-support and was changed to support. Was that?
That's correct, but it leaves me wondering too, where does that leave us? Does it then require a second motion that gives it first and or second reading? Okay, so I wasn't clear on that. I would have maybe worded it differently, but now I think about it, that seems logical. Councillor Carlson's motion is appropriate, yeah.
So Councillor Carlson has made that motion. Councillor Trainer, are you seconding that motion now that you've received the clarification, or?
Yeah, sorry, I'm confused. So we are now, we're approving the first reading for both and the environmental impact assessment. That's correct? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I will second that.
Thank you. Okay, so further discussion on this. Councillor Holmes.
Well, I'm confused as well. I would like the people who made the arguments, which sounded logical to me, of why it wasn't necessary to do at a first reading, to maybe repeat what they had said before, which had convinced me. Sorry to put that on you guys, but.
Madam Mayor, may I?
Please go ahead.
Maybe convinced the other way, but when I asked the question of our Director of Development Services, and I believe that his answer was a very valuable and legitimate one. And I think that ensuring that something can actually be built here before it gets rezoned is a good move. Otherwise, we might see rezoning happening before we might have to allow a whole bunch of things to be built, even though it's an environmentally sensitive area. So if something has to be done anyways, and it can be done in, my understanding, it can be done as a environmentally sensitive development permit as part of that same process, 2 birds, 1 stone. I think it makes sense to just get it done. And as Madam Mayor mentioned earlier, there is no rush if it's going to be waiting on a sewer hookup or further conversation regarding the sewer. So the proponent came in prepared for a complete denial. I think council is offering their support, but I think putting this condition on it is justified.
Does that answer your confusion? Address it, I mean? It doesn't really answer. Yeah. All right, thank you. Councillor Barkle and then Councillor Patton.
To our Director of Development Services. So normally, well, sometimes they would come in with an environmental assessment already done. We could give it first and second reading tonight, and then there would be a public hearing scheduled at some point. And at what point would an environmental, and it could all go all the way through to third and an adoption without the environmental assessment. So whether we do the environmental, or require the environmental assessment between first and second reading or between second and third reading doesn't really make a difference, but doing it somewhere before the public hearing would be important, I suppose. And
Your Worship, that's correct. There is, I think the main intention for our staff, alternate staff recommendation was to have this report done prior to the public hearing. You know, there's different ways you can structure this, but you could also go first and second and then require the report to be done before scheduling of a public hearing.
okay, thank you. So, all right, so that's kind of what I thought, but you were saying between first and second, and I wondered, well, why was that important? My follow-up question is there's a certain amount of time if we say, if the developer or proponent wants to wait and see what happens with the Echo Village, which could be, I don't know, a year or two, how long can this sort of sit there, say, between second and third reading, or between first and second reading, or between third reading and adoption, before it falls off the table and he has to go through the whole process again? Because you know, that would be very important to their decision.
Might be a question better suited to our corporate services director, but primarily like our bylaws stay on our books indefinitely until council decides to rescind that bylaw. So if only 2 readings is provided as an example, then it would stay at second reading indefinitely.
Okay, thank you.
Did you wish to comment on that, Karen? Okay. Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate, unfortunately, I wasn't at the meeting this morning, so I missed the 2 hours of talking about the environmental. But we have had an environmental, it's a big but, we have had an environmental assessment done right next door on the same piece, not the same property, but in the same vicinity. And we allowed a two-lot split on that piece of property based on an assessment that was provided. So for me, the way I look at it is, and as our Director of Development Services to Councillor Barkwell indicated, this could sit on the books for until whenever the Eco Village begins or sewer is taken up into Deer Ridge. And so they do have time, but I think to just give them the first reading tonight and not a first and second reading, I think kind of handcuffs them a little bit more than allowing the due process in which we do for every application that comes to us on the first and second reading. So I think that if they're going to be waiting for sewer, then we could be waiting 2 years, and it gives them a lot of time to complete their environmental assessment. So I would love to see this go forward with first and second. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Councillor Barkle.
After sort of getting the ins and outs of the process and the steps and the order of things, I kind of agree with Councillor Patton, but if I vote against this motion and then and if more people felt like me and it was defeated, would we be able to then bring forward exactly the same or similar motion that to give it first and second reading tonight without the requirement for the environmental assessment. Or, I mean, I don't want this, we all sort of agreed that it should go forward. The only question here is that whether there should be the environmental assessment between the first and second reading or second and third reading. It'd be nice, yeah, so the basic question is, if it's defeated, what's the alternative? Can we still go ahead with the?
So Madam Mayor, what is on the table right now is to provide first reading to both the OCP and the zoning bylaw. So if that is defeated, then first reading is defeated.
So the question, could I reintroduce a motion that says to give it first and second reading?
Well, this is already on the table. We have to vote on this motion first.
Assuming it's to vote, because that would depend on how I might vote, right? If I vote to defeat this
Oh, I
motion,
see, after this vote. Also,
Yeah.
sorry.
And if other people voted with me, Councillor Patton and I, would we be able to bring in a similar but different motion?
I'm thinking that potentially we could do an amendment to the motion if that was amenable. That would be the best way to do it.
Is what you're suggesting is if this is defeated as first reading, then first and second doesn't work because first is already defeated. That's what you're saying.
Correct.
Better to have an amendment. Councillor Holmes.
I guess, could you also split the vote? We have 3 points here. You could do the first 2 and then take the third as a separate vote. So I guess that would be another way to do it.
Yes.
But I do have a question is, what I'm struggling with, does it matter whether it's between first or second?
Yeah, I don't understand that either. What does it matter?
I don't know. Maybe it does. Am I missing something? I don't know if it matters.
Madam Mayor, the intent would be the same if it was first and second, but an environmental report before scheduling a public hearing, or if it's first and then the environmental report gives second and then a public hearing, it's the same. That's the same intent, but both have the environmental assessment attached to them. So as Councillor Holmes mentioned, should council wish to vote separately on the motions, we could do that.
Okay, Brad.
Yeah, the reason why we did structure the way we did, and instead of requiring or requesting first and second right now, was in the event that council wanted to review the environmental information prior to scheduling a public hearing. So prior to us initiating the public consultation, we could get the environmental work, report those findings back to council. And at that point, council could decide if they still wanted to move forward with public consultation efforts. So that was the intent. And again, you can structure it either way, but I just wanted to explain kind of the justification for first only at this time.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, and Councillor Barkwell, are you still, no, okay. So are we ready to vote then? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Patton and Councillor Van Elfen are opposed, so this one carries as well. Thank you. Thank you, Ariane. Okay, so on to 9.2. Road closure and removal of highway dedication bylaw number 2021-018. And Brad, you are speaking to this one. Thank you.
So I have a presentation for this, and I'll just wait until it's up on the screen before I can start. Thank you. Next slide, please. Oh. Next slide. Great. Thank you. So the district's in receipt of a request from 5 properties located in the north area of the Trout Creek community to purchase a strip of land that is owned by the District of Summerland. Specifically, the properties are 2450 and 2590 Landry Crescent, which were part of a subdivision that was registered with Land Titles BC in 2005. And it's regarded as the first phase of the Landry Crescent subdivision. And there were future phases, as you can see, kind of moving north from this location, going along Landry Crescent that it proceeded thereafter in 2005. Next slide, please. So with that first subdivision plan, which you can see on this slide, there was a dedication of a walkway, which I'll get into what specifically a walkway is. It's defined in the Land Titles Act at the time of subdivision to the benefit of the District of Summerland. From the developer. And the main intent at the time in 2005 was to construct a trail in front of lots 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. You can see that the walkway dedication also extends on the east side of lot 5 and connecting into Landry Crescent Road for the public access to access along the side of lot 5 and then going along the lakeshore northward. Next slide, please. Thanks. I think you skipped one. Just go back. Sorry. However, at the time of actual construction of this trail, when the district went forward to move with the placement of the trail, there was the decision made by the district at the time to actually place the trail further upland from where the walkway land is located in its current form. So, and it represents through this red hatched area. That area is protected through a statutory right-of-way. And you can see on the subdivision plan, although it's quite fine grain, I apologize, that the walkway dedicated land is directly abutting this statutory right-of-way, but closer to the lakeshore within, and also abutting Okanagan Lake. Next slide, please. So the use of a statutory right-of-way is a common method for local governments, and in particular for the District of Summerland, to protect an existing trail along private property and within private property. This right-of-way is, again, like I mentioned, to the benefit of the District of Summerland. It extends also continually moving north from these 5 property owners along the lakeshore for all the private property that's found to the north of these 5 properties. And that was what protects the existing location of Gartrell Trail, which is also extending further past these 5 properties. Next slide, please. Okay, in 2017, the Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations updated the general permission to use Crown land for private mortgage purposes. And with this update to their regulations for private mortgages, they required that only upland property owners are eligible for ownership of one single-use private dock to be used for private mortgage purposes, and that all ownership of that private dock would be tied to the upland property owner. So what that effectively that resulted in terms of that regulation change was for these 5 property owners, the District of Summerland was considered the upland property owner, and therefore they could not apply to the ministry for a dock as well as maintain ownership and rights to the existing docks that were currently found in place, kind of a non-conforming situation with the 2 existing docks found on the property. As a result of this, and once becoming aware of the situation, like I said, we were approached by the landowners that represent lots 6, 7, 8, and 9 to potentially purchase the former walkway lands in front of each respective parcel, and to purchase the land at the fair market value of this property. The district completed a fair market value assessment, and we then presented that in camera and closed to council for consideration, and we are now considering potential of the road closure and also sale of these strips of land to these 4 property owners. I should mention that Lot 5 at this time does not currently want to proceed with purchase of the parcel directly abutting their lands, but we are still recommending as part of this draft bylaw that the road be closed in front of their lands and title raised to it in the event of that was to happen in the future. I do want to mention too on this slide, although again you can't really see it too well, that there is still the statutory right-of-way registered on all 4 of these private property owners that protects the current form of guardrail trail. So the kind of the bolder colors are what's proposed to be sold to each individual owner, but the actual guardrail trail is located further upland and already within private property of each respective lot owner. And again, protected by that statutory right-of-way and the benefit of the District of Summerland. Next slide, please. So before council today for consideration is the road closure and removal of highway dedication bylaw number 2021-18. So as I mentioned, walkway, as it was formally designated under Land Title Act, is actually a form of highway. And because its classification as a form of highway, the only way that a title can be raised to this land before it can be transferred to any other party, it needs to go through a road closure bylaw. And that's the semantics of the type of bylaw that's before council today. I know it has been a bit confusing with the public as to, given that there is no road in this location, it's primarily a walkway trail land, but that is a process that's legislatively required to occur before any transfer can occur. So like I mentioned, road closures by way of bylaw adoption, and then that bylaw, once adopted, has to go to Land Titles BC to be registered before title is actually raised to that property and put in the name of the District of Summerland. If council decides to move forward with the first 3 readings of proposed bylaw number 2021-18 tonight, staff intends to provide public notice of the road closure within the next 2 editions of the Summerland Review and come back for potential adoption of the bylaw at council's next meeting of May 25th, 2021. We also, in accordance with the, I think, community charter as well, we need to receive Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure approval prior to the next meeting is what we're targeting as well before council considers adoption of the bylaw. And like I mentioned, following the adoption of the bylaw and then subsequent registration of that bylaw with Land Titles BC, we would then go forward with subsequent subdivision and consolidation of our parcel of land, subject to the sale of each sale agreement with each individual property owner, and to be added to their lot, and as a condition of our sale agreement that we've entered with all 4 lot owners. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the area of road closure that's identified in bylaw number 2021-18. So what's proposed to be closed is everything bordering lots 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Again, the statutory right-of-way for Guardrail Trail will remain intact and located on the private property that's currently in place. As well, though, we are recommending that we maintain the access point on the east side of Lot 5 as a dedicated walkway area. So that's not subject to this road closure. I do want to mention as well that council could consider closing the road at today's meeting or giving at least the first 3 readings, and just decide to not move forward with a sale at this time as another potential option. But we are recommending that council goes forward with the sale at this time for those 4 lot owners as well. So just in summary, I think I speak on behalf of all district staff that we recognize that there's been some confusion from the public with the intent of this road closure bylaw. And we hope that this presentation helps to clarify the intent of what the road closure bylaw is intending to do. I do want to point out that we've also prepared a background document for the public to try to explain the intent of the bylaw and subsequent sale to each respective property owner to hope provide some clarity to the community as to what the intent of the bylaw is. Thank you.
Okay, council questions. Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, thank you. So, well, I've got lots of emails about this and phone calls. So I kind of boiled it down to two concerns. One is, as was said, there's been a lot of confusion. A lot of people think the walkway is going to be closed, but we can assure that's not going to happen, that the covenant remains in place, correct?
To your worship, and to Councillor Holmes, yes, thank you for the question. I can confirm again that the statutory right-of-way that's currently on private property is what's protecting Gartrell Trail right now and will remain in place to protect Gartrell Trail moving forward.
Okay, thank you. And to follow up, so the second concern that people have expressed to me is that with the district owning that riparian area, we're in a position to be able to ensure the environmental integrity of the shoreline, and if we give up that, then we're giving up that ability. So I'm just wondering, what tools, if any, do we have to protect riparian areas anywhere along the lake where there's private property?
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. So whether it's owned publicly or privately, everything within 30 meters of Okanagan Lake is protected through the Riparian Areas Protection Regulation, or RAPR as it's associated in terms of its acronym. That regulation is a provincial regulation that protects all potential disturbance or development within the riparian area. The district, over top of that regulation, has and requires the issuance of a watercourse development permit for any development within the riparian area. And that's our primary tool for any type of work or disturbance within the riparian area before any disturbance can occur, that they would trigger the need for a watercourse development permit, and then a biologist to review the current environmental qualities of the subject's property, and then also what the impacts may be on a proposed development in the area. And like I said, and that would be regardless of whether the property is owned publicly or owned privately.
So, for example, along that pathway, there is a little tree, a treed area, I guess. It looks like it's in the riparian area. So how is that protected moving forward?
Currently, all those lots actually that were part of the Landry Crescent subdivision have a restricted covenant on title that's up to the 15-meter mark to protect the riparian area. That restricted covenant is still in place and protects any works at all from occurring within the riparian area, unless there has been the guidance of a professional biologist and a subsequent issuance of a watercourse development permit to allow for that work to occur within the riparian area. So with regards to those trees, before anything was to occur in the future with regards to those trees, and given that they are located within the riparian area, it would require the consultation of a biologist, probably in collaboration with a professional arborist, to confirm that there need to be some work done on the trees before any of that work could occur.
Councillor Trainer and then Councillor Carlson.
I just wanted to follow up on that. I believe it's lot 6. You can kind of see it in slide 2 of your presentation, Brad. There's 2 mature, very old willow trees there. And I'm just wondering, is there a way to ensure that they are protected? Like would a covenant work on that? I'm just wondering if there's another layer of protection that we can add, because those trees are an integral part of that area. And I'm sure a lot of wildlife live in them and they look healthy. There's currently a swing actually between the 2 of them. But if we were to sell this land, they would be sold to the owner of lot 6. And so I just wanted to ensure that those trees are protected. And if there's a way to do that.
Thank you, Councillor Trainer, and through your worship again. We've recognized those trees as well as a potential item that would require perhaps further protection and discussion with the private landowner on lot 6. I do note actually he's on the Zoom call tonight, so maybe he could also confirm any discussion and questions with regards to those specific 2 trees directly to council. But if council so chooses to allow him to speak, sorry. We have at the staff level engaged with him as well, and he's confirmed that his intention is to protect those trees. We discussed the possibility of adding a condition to our sale agreement to place it as a condition of the sale that prior to any works on those trees that he would have to engage with the District of Summerland at the time to confirm those works and to reach agreement with the district prior to allowing that work to proceed on within the site. Again, that would be over on top of the riparian areas protection regulation for that property.
Okay, thank you for that.
Councillor Carlson and then Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So my understanding is that these lot owners have purchased these properties. The district owns the upland portion. The province changed the rules. Therefore, these landowners who are not the upland owners of this property cannot build the docks that they had always intended to build. If there's any mistakes in there, let me know. My question is, have we talked as the district, have we talked to the province about finding an alternative way around this so that we don't have to sell this piece of shore so that we can retain it, but these landowners can still benefit while the public also can benefit and we retain the rights and the assurance that that land is still our land?
Through your worship to Councillor Carlson, there has been engagement by both the landowners and as well the District of Summerland directly with the ministry with regards to this issue or concern. From the province's perspective, like they've got a much larger lens that they employ these regulations, and so they'd be worried obviously about any precedent setting, but their regulations are fairly clear, and there's no way of going around the requirement for upland ownership for any private moorage uses. However, another alternative that had been discussed early on in this process was the idea of returning the land to the Crown, which then would also provide, would designate all those landowners as the upland owner instead of a sale of the land.
Okay, thank you. Just further, I know that when it comes to land disposal, if you're to lease land, you'd go through a similar process. Would a leasee of a piece of land be considered, or do they have to be the outright owner?
I believe that's actually the situation that was allowed in the past, that the province allowed lessees to apply for docks if there was upland ownership approval, but they apparently ran into issues with this structure, and so they went back in 2017 when they reviewed their regulations. They no longer allowed for the leasee approach. And that's actually why I think there is 2 existing docks that were approved already within 2 of the 5 lots, because they didn't have upland ownership, but were able to strike an agreement with the district at the time to allow for an application to go forward to the ministry.
Okay, thank you. So basically, unless this land is either sold to the private property owners or returned to the Crown, the only way that a dock can be built is if the District of Summerland builds the dock. So that won't work.
That's correct. We could build a communal dock for 5 owners as an option.
Councillor Van Alphen's your turn.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question through our planner. It's just to elaborate or to expand on Councillor Trainer's thoughts on those trees. So today there's a restricted covenant on that property protecting those trees. Am I correct?
That's correct, with the 15-meter riparian area covenant. Well, it's not actually currently in place, but it will be if this land is added to their private property, if that makes sense. So it would be included within that 15-meter buffer from their property line.
Okay, if I may, Madam Mayor. So if the current owners decided tomorrow or whenever they're going to sell their property, so the next purchaser, it's on land titles, so that would be identified at land titles for the next owner to look, they would be aware that these trees are protected.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Trainer?
Just to confirm on that point with Brad, we would have to put a covenant on lot 6 though to protect the trees as an additional layer. Is that correct? 'Cause that's not on there right now.
Through your worship to Councillor Trainer, no, not necessarily. We going to Councillor Van Alphen's point, there is already a 15-meter riparian area protection covenant on the private property. If these additional pieces of land are added to each private property, that covenant would apply to the front 15 meters in front of the lake, and would protect any potential disturbance of those areas in moving into the future.
Okay, may I have one more question?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so I believe the total cost if these pieces of property were to be sold is about $100,000. What happens with that money? And could it be used to enhance the current trail? Yeah, so I'm wondering what happens with the money, and can we and do we have discretion over how it's used?
Through your worship to Councillor Trainer, I think that there is some flexibility on the district side for that. Right now, the intention, and you see it in my council report, is to direct these funds to the land reserve that the district has. In consideration of where we could use land reserve funding to go towards, definitely capital works projects would be something that would be applicable. Given that it would be additional funding, it perhaps could go to a capital works project that is unforeseen, for example, or something that is planned in the near future.
Okay, and just to follow up on that, the reason I asked that is because the trail does need quite a bit of work right now. And it needs to be fixed in several places, and we're going to need some money to do that. So if we could use money from this sale, that's what I wanted to know, is if it could be directly used to fix up that area.
CAO Stat?
Yeah, so the short answer is yes, council could do that if they wanted to direct the money in that regard.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Hypothetically, this goes through, and the person decides that they cut down Councillor Trainor's favorite trees. What's the recourse of the district?
Through your worship to Councillor Patton, you know, it is difficult in terms of enforcement to catch things before they occur. I think that, again, like we have the riparian areas protection regulation in place. We have our watercourse development permit. We also have the, you know, we've in any discussions we have with the owner and their willingness to protect the trees, but it is difficult to maintain any impacts to the riparian areas if it doesn't, for example, trigger a building permit where it requires them to come into our office, as an example, and to seek information. We do rely from an enforcement perspective on a complaint-based approach. You know, if there is ever you know, an observation from a member of the public that there is a work about to start, then, you know, our bylaw enforcement team will respond fairly quickly to any concerns of impacts, especially to a sensitive area, and to try to follow up on that concern. But we need the complaint to come into our office so that we're aware of it. So that's the primary concern.
Follow up, Madam Mayor? Thank you. So that was my next question, was that it would have to be a complaint based from a member of the community. So we did the land sale, and now it becomes my property, even though they're within the riparian, they're within the 15 meters, but work starts to happen. They want to spruce up the beach. They want to do something there. It would be a complaint based by the public. At that point, the damage is done. And again, we really do not have a recourse as the district besides enforcement, as in ticketing, because, you know, doing unauthorized earthworks is what it would really come down to. So yeah, thank you so much.
Councillor Van Alphen? Oh, sorry. Sorry, it's Councillor Barkle first.
Oh, sure.
And then I'll go back to you. It actually was me first, but I'm letting Councillor Barkle go, so I'll let you go too.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the answer to Councillor Patton's question is exactly the same answer as if this land sale didn't happen. If it's on the district-owned property, if it's on the Crown land, the enforcement or lack thereof is exactly the same. And that's the big problem. And the issue that I think that the public doesn't understand is that none of these issues change. Matter of fact, if anything, there is perhaps a little bit more, and maybe not even that. If it's private land, we can hold that landowner accountable. If it's district land and something happens and they rip out some plants and trees, well, how do we know who did that, and who do we hold accountable? Unless somebody's down there seeing them do it and willing to testify to that effect, even then, I don't know what the consequences are. So as far as holding people accountable, I can't see a change on the ownership rates. Am I correct there? I see you nodding your head, so I'm thinking I'm correct.
If that was a question directed to me, yeah, that'd be correct. I think we've had a lot of unauthorized cuttings within our public park areas, as an example. Sometimes we don't catch people in the act. So it is an issue of catching them in the act in order to gain that evidence. And then, you know, in terms of recourse, if we're able to collect that evidence, then we can take people to court and ensure that the regulations are followed. But it's hard to do without that evidence in hand.
Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My thoughts exactly for Councillor Borkow just said, but through to a planner just for some reassurance. So the land gets sold, if that's what we agree upon. We assure the public that that trail cannot be obstructed. So some landowner can't decide to put up a nice white picket fence. So that trail and the people will always have access through that trail, even though these people purchase the land.
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Van Alphen, that's correct. Stated a few times tonight that the statutory right-of-way protects the trail in its current location. It also protects Guard Trail moving forward north of these 5 properties and in and around the north bed of the Trout Creek community and extending all the way up to the campground location there. So it's the same protection that would be in place for those properties.
Thank you.
I have a question and a comment. What is that? There's a covenant plan shown on the drawings that we have, KAP 86848. What is that? Is that the riparian protection? So it's above, it's west of the 86847, which is the walkway or the highway or whatever it is. Do you see what I'm referring to? The plan that has the red line on it. It shows a covenant plan. What is that?
That is the walkway current location. So the red line is the statutory right-of-way, and then the walkway plan is directly above it, which is the subject of the road closure tonight.
But isn't that 86847? Yes. So my question is, on that plan where the red line is, where the trail is, it shows covenant plan 86848.
Yeah, so 86847 is the right-of-way.
Yes.
And walkway plan KAP 77427 is the walkway.
And what's covenant plan 86848?
Oh, sorry, that is the riparian covenant.
Good, that's what I thought, but I just wanted to make sure. So
Thank you.
walking along there, you can clearly see that there's good adherence to the native plantings that are in there. At least that's what I noticed. My second question is not the area from the high water mark to the lake and the bed of the lake, isn't that owned by the Crown?
That's correct, yeah.
So when we're saying that we're selling that section, it's not, I don't understand how we could sell that to private landowners when really it's owned by the Crown.
Well, the high water mark is on the further down slope area closer to the lake on the other side of our property. That would be considered the high water mark.
Even closer than what we're talking about selling, you mean?
It would be on the very, I guess, north property boundary would be the high water mark boundary of our property, the road closure area. Like everything everything below the high water mark is owned by the Crown. The first parcel that's further upland is the walkway area. That is a strip of land that's in front of these five private properties, and then each private property has their own boundary, but that boundary is not the high water mark, if that makes sense. So
Yeah, that does make sense.
yeah, thanks.
Okay, and then the comment that I wanted to make is in discussing this, yes, we've all been getting emails and calls. So this was a particularly civil conversation I had with this woman. And she was suggesting that one of the ways that we can, as a community, kind of keep track of this, similar to how bylaw enforcement works, is if you see anything going on that has to do with environmental protection, you can call the RAP line. And she said, you know, and I said, well, that sounds like bylaw enforcement, you know, it's complaint driven. She said, yeah, you know, there's so many people down there that want to be able to continue to use that walkway and enjoy the vegetation and the habitat and the ecosystem that's there. She said, it, you know, takes the community to protect the community sometimes too. So that's another option. I, like others have said, you know, I don't want to see those willow trees go unless they become a hazard, then that's a different thing. But so that is the end of my questions. So, oh, Councillor Carlson has her hand up again.
Yeah, I just wanted to reaffirm, I know it's been said once, but sale or no sale, the statutory right-of-way and the walking pathway will remain where they are and continue to be fixed when they erode. And because it's a statutory right-of-way, they cannot be impeded by fences and rocks and trees and bushes and other things, correct?
That's correct. And actually, I should even mention that statutory right-of-way is at a higher level of protection than an easement, as an example. Statutory right-of-way requires that access be maintained for the benefit of the District of Summerland legislatively. So it's different than an agreement between two landowners that we're going to do this for you through an easement. It is a requirement that that access be there and unrestricted moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to add that not only is access maintained, but as mentioned a bit earlier, it's in our capital plan this year to, in fact, do repairs and some upgrades and hardening of the existing trail access. I guess to even further improve and formalize that trail access and to make that even better for that public access.
Councillor Carlson, are you ready to bring the motion forward?
I have one more question. Sorry to harp on this, but the alternative to selling this to the private property owners would potentially be returning it to the Crown. The reason that that isn't what is proposed, is it simply because there's no revenue in returning it to the Crown, or was there another reason why that wasn't the preference for helping these landowners build what they had anticipated when they purchased their properties?
Through the mayor on to Councillor Carlson, thank you for the question. I believe it was early on engagement with the landowners when we talked about the alternatives. Unfortunately, I wasn't here at the time. It was CEO Anthony Haddad, previous CEO, that was talking with the landowners at the time, which evaluated the different options for them moving forward. And the idea was that considering the return to the Crown might be a more complicated process versus going through just a direct sale with the district, because then it involved multiple levels of government jurisdiction between us as the District of Summerland and also the ministry. And then it could get slowed down on the ministry's end So I think in the landowners, in evaluating the options, they preferred to deal directly with us as opposed to two levels of government, I guess, and considering that other option.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Van Olfen?
Put the motion on the table, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
That council give first, a second and third reading to road closure and removal of highway dedication bylaw number 2021-18.
Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Holmes, thank you. Further discussion? Councillor Holmes.
Just if we pass this, then could you remind me again of the process? There notices have to go out, and again, could we make sure that something in plain English is included with that? Thanks.
If I may clarify that for council, yeah, our intention here, if council does proceed with 3 readings, would that the next 2 editions of the Summerland Review would be advertising the road closure bylaw, as well as the sale and disposition to the 4 property owners that have requested to purchase their portion of abutting land, and then we subsequently bring that back forward if we're able to achieve also Ministry of Transportation approval to the next council meeting on May 25th, which again council would be able to evaluate it before they adopt.
Okay, but with these 2 notices, what concerns me are these 2 notices going into the Summerland Review, if they're just the technical wording, and I think we need to explain clearly what exactly is going on.
Graham, would like to speak to that, and Karen?
Thank you. It's a good question, Councillor Holmes, and a fair one. At this point, we have tried to add additional plain language to the wording of the text of the notice, and we direct to the website for additional information because we've created a significant amount of information in a plain language way through our background document and associated materials. So that's the current approach, although we've also made an effort, I think, for the size of ad to increase the size of it so it's more readable as well, which is there's some of the other comments that we had heard from the public.
Thank you. Anything to add, Karen? Okay. So ready for the question then? No, Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When this first came to us, I thought, big deal. It's a walkway. You're going to move it over 6 feet. Everything's still going to be the same. But, the more I think about it, and with the correspondence that we've received, there's more passion in this Gartrell Trail than there was on anything that I've seen come forward lately in Trout Creek. And not just from Trout Creek people, but from Summerland in general. And this is one of the very few times for my initial gut feeling, I think, it's not really a big deal. But unfortunately tonight I will not support this. I think that there's some good things, but I think that for me, the citizens have spoken, and I will not support this tonight. So anyways, just giving my 2 cents. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too cannot support this as it's being presented to us. I think that if we need to have further conversation and look at alternatives, then we should. But I do have a lot of respect for the people who have been writing all these letters. And I think we need to do a better job of explaining these, but we also need to do a better job of protecting our foreshore and protecting our public land and making sure that it is going to remain an asset for as long as it exists. So I do think that there's likely to be more conversation regarding this piece of property, and hopefully the landowners and staff and perhaps the province can continue that conversation.
Okay, Councillor Barkwell.
Excuse me, question to Councillor Carlson is denying this or voting against this doing anything to protect our foreshore?
I think so. I think that we will give the people who live and use this piece, that live in this community and use that piece of land, ownership and pride, and they will continue to be there and watch it and take care of it. And I think that that's huge. I think they'll feel like they can actually do something about it. And there's, I don't know, and I also don't know if that's a fair question, but I do think that there is more to it than simply protecting the foreshore. It was obviously put in place for a reason, and we own it. I mean, we own anything really. So, you know, talking about returning it to the Crown, maybe that's another option, but I really don't think it's necessary to sell this to private landowners when the people of Summerland are the landowners.
Sorry, I don't understand that. When the people of Summerland are the landowners, I mean, this is there's a statutory right-of-way there for the trail. The trail's going to be on that statutory right-of-way. Nothing's going to change. And what the primary concern everybody has is protection of that riparian area. And the concerns I've heard is that it might affect the riparian area. And the concern I have is protecting the riparian area, but there's nothing in this that I think that I can see is going to do any damage to the riparian area, and nothing that's going to assist in protecting the riparian area. It seems to be a totally neutral kind of a transaction, but it will give us $100,000 that we could use towards trail enhancement. So I guess I'm just making my point of why I would support this.
Any other comments? Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Councillor Patton and Councillor Carlson are opposed, and the motion carries. Okay, it's 8:45. We have one other item left here. We may have to call for a vote in this to go on after 9 o'clock, but we'll get started here. 9.3, the Downtown Neighborhood Action Plan.
I'll try to read quickly. One of Council's key strategic priorities for the better part of this term, last couple of years, has been the creation and development of a new downtown neighborhood plan for the downtown community as well as the greater District of Summerland community. To that end, District Council formalized a new downtown neighborhood action plan task force in May of last year. Attached to the report is the terms of reference of that downtown neighborhood plan task force. The objective of the task force was to develop a new downtown plan in approximately an 18-month timeline. The task force, since having members placed on it, have been meeting since November of last fall, monthly to determine a proposed scope of work for the development of a new downtown neighborhood action plan, to eventually release to as a request for proposals to a qualified consulting firm. The task force, along with staff, are on. We believe we're on track to complete the plan within an 18-month timeline, and starting on January 2021 to June 2022, And the attached draft scope of services is intended to meet that timeline and also holds any potential consulting firm accountable to meeting that June 2022 deadline. In discussion, the task force and through a number of meetings reviewed the section 15 of the district's official community plan, which is our downtown strategic plan. And we felt as a committee that the most of the policy direction within the official community plan is still valid and relevant today. In addition, the downtown design guidelines are included as part of the official community plan Schedule O that consider the built form and character of the downtown commercial areas. For the most part, are still applicable and should be encouraged for any new development within the downtown. Task force members were clear that not wanting to develop a plan that would not be implemented. There was a real clear fear that we would develop a plan that would sit on my shelf in my office and not get actioned out into the field and not result in any tangible implementable projects for the District of Summerland with regards to the downtown core. So in that regard, the draft scope of services heavily focused on creating a plan with implementable actions, with preliminary costing of projects, phasing of priority projects that are determined with the community in consultation with the community. And then also we've included the word action in the downtown neighborhood action plan to recognize the intent of this proposed plan in the scope of services. The downtown neighborhood plan task force has narrowed the scope of the services of the proposed plan to three key focus areas. Land use intensification and density, infrastructure renewal, public areas and gathering spaces. And these three key focus areas are designed to target, again, like I said, actionable projects that builds on the vision for the downtown that's already established in the district's official community plan. Some of the key deliverables identified in the scope of services includes, and these are just highlights. There's much more in the scope of services document, so I do encourage members of the public to review that document in detail. But just as highlights, the design and location of a new community all-season Central Civic Plaza, a master plan for the future design and enhancement of Memorial Park, the review of OCP designations to determine where new infill development should occur within the downtown area, but also in the surrounding area around the downtown area. A review of the Central Business 1 zone and other zones located within the downtown core to determine the suitability of attracting new development and new investment into the downtown core. A review of parking demand and total supply within the downtown. Streetscape designs for key road corridors, including Wharton Street, Main Street, and Victoria Road South. A downtown wayfinding signage program, and then, like I said, a plan for burying select overhead power lines, and the standardization of downtown street lighting as other key implementable projects to come out of this plan. So following the presentation of this draft scope of services at their meeting at April 21st, the Downtown Neighborhood Plan Task Force provided support for the scope of services and for the district to proceed to the release of a request for proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Council questions on this? Councillor Carlson.
Just a comment, but I think that this is a very, very nicely refined version of what it is that the Downtown Plan Task Force is looking for. And based on all the conversation that they've had, I think that we're going to get a very good plan out of this. And people will start, once they hear about it and start to get engaged in this, I think there'll be a lot of excitement around it. So I look forward to moving it forward. I'll move the motion if there needs to be a mover at this point.
Okay, questions? Okay, please go ahead. Oh, sorry. Oh, okay, so if you could read the motion, and we have a willing seconder already for you, Councillor
I
Carlson.
move that the downtown neighborhood plan scope of services information report from the Director of Development Services be received as information.
And that's seconded by Councillor Holmes. And you wanted to speak on that, thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to actually thank the task force. I think the task force takes its job very seriously, and these terms of reference were reviewed in a draft form very carefully by the task force. And one of the, I think, most difficult things was getting their heads around on what we mean by downtown. What is the definition of downtown? What are the boundaries of downtown? And I think that's reflected in the scope where we have different meanings depending on what we're talking about. So if we're talking about densification and housing, it's a different boundaries than if we're talking about public gathering spaces where it's more just the central core. So I think that's quite innovative that we're able to do that, and I think anybody whoever applies for this tender will be quite excited about that too. Thanks.
Good. Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Maybe I'm wasting time just saying that I agree with Councillor Holmes, but I was really worried about the fact that we want to talk about Main Street's a little bit different than the residential areas from the outside, and I see that how they've addressed that, and that's great. And I really also like that they've narrowed it down to these, land use, intensification and density, infrastructure renewal in public areas and gathering spaces, that they've, narrowed it down, what do they call it, a key focus area or something. And that's great, because when you see comments or things such as community vitality, well, that's just so vague. Anything you do, you could argue, is going to increase community vitality, from adding a fountain to cleaning up the washrooms. So that, all in all, great work, appreciated.
Okay, anyone else? Yeah, I'll just say that the task force has done an amazing amount of work in relatively short time. It took us a long time to get to that, and then all of a sudden, that the word action in there really makes really is demonstrated by the work that they've done already. So we have the motion on the floor. Any further discussion or comment? I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Thanks, Brad, for moving this forward. Do we have any notices of motion this evening? Okay, on to information items, which is 13.1 correspondence. 5 pieces of correspondence. Is there anything that anyone would like to bring forward? I just wanted to bring forward attachment A, which is from the South Okanagan-Similkameen Pride Society. We don't do proclamations or declarations here at the district, but June is Pride Month. I have a question. They've posed a question in here. So my question is wondering when the crosswalks, and there's talking specifically about the rainbow crosswalks, but I'm talking about generally, when they are scheduled to be repainted again. I think it's every second year, but maybe I could ask Graham if you could follow up for council on that.
Happy to do so. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Great, thank you. Anything else? We go from Pride to Caribou to all kinds of things. It's quite a a variety of things, old growth. Okay, so could I have someone bring that forward, the correspondence forward for information, please? Receive for information. Thank you, Councillor Van Elfen and Councillor Holmes. All in favor? Great. And now on to councillor reports. I'm going to start with Councillor Barkwell today. Oh, party, did I miss something? Oh, I did miss something. Such a hurry. 13.2, commission minutes. Thank you, Councillor Holmes. You want to bring something forward?
No, I just want to just bring, so on attachment A, so the minutes of November 25th of the Downtown Neighborhood Plan Task Force, we had sent those back and for a correction, and the correction hasn't been made. It's the same minutes as far as I can see. So I would like to send them back again. That that the appointment of the chair, it wasn't myself who nominated him. I believe it was Neil Braun, but I'm not entirely sure. So this had come to us before, and the correction has been made. So I don't want to approve it the way it is. The other B and C are fine. D, the February 24th minutes, I would just like to, so there's a whole list under the business items of random things, and I think it should be noted that these were just different thoughts and comments from various different members of the task force. There was no kind of consensus or anything on any one of these things. They were just being put out there. I don't think that's really clear in the minutes that that's what was going on there. The other ones I don't have any problem with.
Okay, so attachment A, and then the February 24th, so attachment D, and those are just the two? Yes, okay. You're recording that, are you, Karen? Great. So the other three, B, C, and E, okay to bring those forward for, okay? Would you do that then? Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Patton. All in favor? Thank you. And now on to council reports. Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Via Zoom, I attended the Museum Society meeting. I guess the major thing is that they're having a lot of work done right now, HVAC system and stuff by the district. They're all happy, very happy about that. And they've been closed during the pandemic, but they see that other museums and stuff have been open yet following the guidelines. And so as soon as the renovation work is completed, the museum will be opening again.
Thank you. And their AGM is coming up 20th? Right. Is it the 20th?
I can't remember the date.
It's this month. Thank you, Councillor Barkwell. Could I have somebody make a motion to extend the meeting? Councillor Holmes, by how many minutes?
15?
9:15, all righty. Okay, seconder, Councillor Van Elfen, all in favor? Thank you. Councillor Patton.
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor. I have nothing new to report tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Traynor.
I attended the RDOS meeting last Thursday, and unfortunately I haven't had time to finalize my report to council from that meeting. So I will get that to you in the next day or two. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Carlson.
Not too much to report. I've been working a lot, and I'm getting vaccinated on Friday, which is earlier than anticipated. So stay safe, everyone in Summerland. I hope that we can get through this little blip, and hopefully as many people as possible will be vaccinated so that we can continue going to meetings and enjoying each other's company, because I do miss you guys. Hopefully I'll be there in June. So that's all I'm going to report tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I'd like to say congratulations to yourself for being chosen the vice president for Silga. So that's great for Summerland. On May 4th, there was the annual joint Okanagan Basin Water Board and Water Stewardship Council meeting. They have a joint meeting every year. And they had a presentation from Ted Zimmerman, who's the Executive Director for Water Protection and Sustainability for the Ministry of Environment, and Jennifer Vigano, who's the Director of Watershed Security. And they gave a very interesting presentation about the provincial government's plans to create a BC watershed security strategy. They're looking to bring in forward legislation in the winter of 2023. They're doing lots of consultations and everything leading up to that. What should come out on the other side of the strategy, they said, is a kind of a shared responsibility and accountability for watershed protection with the provincial government and local governments. There were a lot of questions from the municipal directors about what happens to our source water protection plans, such as the whole thing that we're undertaking right now for our watershed. And the message was that it should elevate our municipal watershed plans, so that we shouldn't be at competition or anything like that with them. So it was all quite positive, the news coming out of that. So something to look forward to, and I'm sure we'll be consulting with their team as we move forward. I'll pass the information on, the contact information on to Mr. Stat, and he can pass it on to Chris and everybody for who they should be talking to, because it's a good contact. And
could I just ask you a question about that?
Yep.
When you were talking, you were saying that there's going to be a lot of consultation, that's it will elevate municipal protection plans. Was there any discussion in terms of the legislation that's coming forward that includes First Nations governments as well?
Yeah, so that was one of the examples that they gave. I mean, a lot of the director said that, you know, how it's incorporating the UNDRIP legislation in watershed management, and that's something that municipalities don't really have the capacity to handle right now, and so that should provide us the guidance and the way forward to do that. So the idea is that we should be able to work on what we need to work on, and it should complement what the province is doing. So and their legislation should give our plan some teeth. So that was the message I got. So it's very early days. They're just starting. It's the policy branch doing this, and so you know, they couldn't really give us any answers of what's going to come out of it. But that was the message. I just want to also say at the RDUS last week, the one really exciting thing that did come forward was the South Okanagan Child Care Action Plan was presented, and that's something, if you recall, that we participated in. I think it was UBCM funding that provided that, or funding from the province anyway. And they'll be coming to us at some point, I guess, to present, and it's a pretty interesting plan. There's some good information specifically about Summerland in there, and I can send it's on the RDUS website right now. I can send everybody the link to that, so it's worth a look. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Not a whole lot to report. I had my vaccination the end of last month, and I'm still here. So please, if your time comes, please get it done so we're all can carry on with life. And just happy belated Mother's Day to all the mothers. Thank you.
Okay, and then our final public media comment opportunity. Any takers? No. Okay. Call for adjournment. Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Holmes, all in favor? Thank you.